let's watch another Ben Jabino. You're being lied to about Israel and Palestine. Facts. He's such a clown. This is good artwork, though, I think. It's not bad. I should have pre-watched this, because maybe he's going to say a bunch of shit that I don't fact-check on the fly, but it's only 8 minutes 53. Historical background. Ah, he's probably going to be full of shit. Let's have a look.
The things that we have been seeing on our screens from Hamas are atrocities, obviously. But the media have said that these atrocities, they're really missing context.
Okay.
The context they are providing, well, that context is a bunch of lies.
Oh yeah, it's the classic. Why did this happen? Why did this come from Gaza and not from any of the other countries that have anti-Semitism? Why didn't this come from, I don't know, like Algeria? Why didn't they do? Well, you have to understand. This is what you said yesterday, wasn't it? Or was it the day before yesterday? Listen, my white liberal friend, you seem to be trying to analyze these outcomes through a very Western lens. You seem to be projecting your own Western values onto a world far away, far beyond. What you fail to understand is, from your Western liberal lens, is that Arabs are mental. Like, it's just, okay. That evil exists in the world. Oh, wow. True. Maril sweatshirt with the $10. Israeli military has been wanting to play with their toys for the longest. Plus, Egypt warned them days in advance before the initial attack. Russell Brand can eat a mean one. Again, the Egyptian warnings were, there was nothing, like Israel gets warnings like that all the time. And we don't know any detail about that warning. I don't think that's like Israel just saying, oh, there's a warning. Let him do it so we can fight back. I don't think that's a really naive way of looking at politics, but yeah. The IDF had a lot of problems internally, as well as the entire Israeli state had problems before any of this happened. Like, there are plenty of reasonable reasons that they were unprepared. Not like some conspiracy. I just need to go into this weird conspiracy shit.
Israeli military has been wanting to play with their toys for the longest. Plus, Egypt warned them days in advance before the initial attack. Russell Brand can eat a mean one.
And with $5, there goes Ben being disingenuous. Good one. He looks, he's really going for it here, isn't he? Oh god, this is gonna be so fact-based.
There are 4 myths generally propagated by the left
Okay.
around the history of Israel and the Palestinians.
Okay.
These myths matter because they lead people into a peculiar moral relativism whereby attempted murder or successful murder of Jews is excused, and meanwhile, the evil human rights violations of the Palestinians are minimized. Myth number 1.
Okay.
Israel is historically Muslim territory. This is a pure and absolute lie. Israel is historically Jewish territory. According to the Bible and certain interpretations of contemporaneous archaeology, Joshua entered the land of Israel in 1400 BC. The Kingdom of David was founded around 1000 BC. The first Temple of Solomon was built in approximately 957 BC. The second temple was built in approximately 515.
How much of this gives you the right to come back 2,500 years later and ship people off who've been living there for generations? What a stupid fucking argument. Again, Ben Shapiro has just told you why America belongs to the Native Americans. He has. He's just said it. The Native Americans can reclaim all the United States. As long as they can just get one other benevolent empire to help them out, it's fair game, apparently. Okay.
BC. The Hasmonean dynasty was founded in 166 BC. Jerusalem was destroyed in 70 BC, and the Jews exiled.
You know what's funny is I was once asked by someone what my most right-wing opinion is. And I thought about it, I was like, my most right-wing opinion is that I don't believe anyone has any, like, inalienable right to a certain land, like the kind of like indigenous right to the land thing. I don't think anyone has that inalienable right. I think there are human rights. There are human rights not to get kicked off of your land, of a place, of somewhere that you live. There's a human right to return if you're a refugee. There's a human right to self-determination. There's all those things. And then someone said that, okay, that's like a really right-wing opinion. And I was like, well, that's also the reason actually that I don't support Zionism. because this rationale that Ben Shapiro is using is weaponized just as much by the left as by the right.
Israel in 136 CE. after the defeat of the Bar Kokhba revolt.
You guys keep saying that's a left-wing opinion. Really? Do you think it's a left-wing opinion when they talk about like indigenous rights and the fact that like indigenous communities can just like subvert the will of a state that they live in just because like it's their land and they have a cultural tie to the land, like these disputes in Canada over like pipelines and shit like that, or with Native Americans? Yeah, it's a left-wing opinion as well. Yeah.
The Romans, in an attempt to shame the Jews, renamed the area Palestine as an insult after the Jews' historic enemy, the Philistines. Even during the exile, there was continuous Jewish presence in the land. Islam, which is the religion of the Palestinian Arabs, was not even founded until the 7th century CE or AD. No independent Arab state has ever existed in the area known as Palestine. Myth number
Again, like making it about why is the idea that there was no Palestinian state mean anything? It's not about the fact that there was a state. It's about the fact that there were people who were booted off their land, didn't have anywhere else to go, and to this day, generationally, they're still refugees. That's the problem. That's why it's a very unique refugee crisis as well, because they don't have anywhere else to go. Like they're still refugees. But again, I would imagine Ben Shapiro is not going to ever acknowledge that. As far as Ben Shapiro has never acknowledged what happened in 1948. He doesn't talk about it. He just says that it's called the Nakba because they were angry that the Israelis had a state. That's it.
2. Israel is the cause of the failure of land partition in the Middle East. This is, again, a pure lie.
The UN, the British.
In 1917, the British promised the Jews the entire area of Palestine. At the time, Israel and Transjordan, which is today's Jordan. In 1920, the Arabs began pogroms, a mass murder of Jews, in Jerusalem.
Well, this was called... Okay.
In 1920, the Arabs began pogroms, a mass murder of Jews, in Jerusalem, as a sign of anger at the British mandate in Palestine. In 1922, the British government, in response, announced in a white paper that the Transjordan area, 70% of Palestine, would be sliced off and made an Arab state. That would become Jordan. In 1937, the Peel Commission recommended a rump state for the Jews, in which the British would retain control over Jaffa and Jerusalem. The Arabs would get the entire Negev and nearly the entirety of Judea and Samaria.
Oh, the Negev is a desert, right? Yeah.
And the Jews would get a tiny swath of territory along the coast, including Tel Aviv and Haifa. In 1939, the British, in response again to Arab pressure, restricted Jewish immigration to Palestine just as the Nazis began World War II and just before the Holocaust. Nonetheless, the Jews sided with the Brits, the Arabs sided with Hitler. In 1948...
This is such bullshit. The Arabs, there were Palestinians who fought alongside the Allies in World War II as well. This is just a lie. Now, how is it going to sell for the fucking Al-Husseini story? But
the British... Nonetheless, the Jews sided with the Brits, the Arabs sided with Hitler. In 1948, the British mandate ended and Israel declared its independence.
David Ben-Gurion...
That guy they showed, Al-Husseini, this is the guy that Netanyahu said was encouraging Hitler to do the Holocaust. I think even Ben Shapiro has said that he persuaded... Let me find the Netanyahu one.
How many people did he murder?
Because this is probably one of the worst lies that get spread by right-wing Israelis, because it's Holocaust denial. It's Holocaust revisionism, which is a form of denial. So I think what Netanyahu said was this.
Other attacks on the Jewish community in 1920, 1921, 1929 were instigated by a call of the Mufti of Jerusalem, Haj Amin al-Husseini, who was later sought for war crimes in the Nuremberg trials because he had a central role in fomenting the final solution. He flew to Berlin. A central role in fomenting the final solution. A Palestinian Grand Mufti. Hitler didn't want to exterminate the Jews at the time. He wanted to expel the Jews. And Haj Amin al-Husseini went to Hitler and said, if you expel them, they'll all come here. So what should I do with them? He asked. You said, burn them. So this is a complete lie. Hitler didn't want to do the Holocaust. He wanted to expel them. He did want to do that, but the final solution had already been ordered before Hitler and this guy even met. So Netanyahu purported to describe a meeting between al-Husseini and Hitler in 1941, November. Hitler didn't want to exterminate the Jews at the time. He wanted to expel the Jews. November 1941.
What were the Nazis already doing before November 1941? They were doing death squads. The death squads were already killing tens of thousands of people in Eastern Europe, starting in the summer. This is like, the final solution is already in place. Babin Yar was when? September? So Babin Yar had already happened. They had already sent the death squads out to kill Jews. Like, that's what they did. Yeah. And then they switched. It was 42 when they switched from the death squads to the camps. Yeah, he's trying to say that it was like Wannsee, yeah. Because Wannsee was 42. But it's not like Nazis had already made the decision. The decision was already to exterminate Jews. So Netanyahu is just doing Holocaust denial. It's so fucking gross. And also, Ben Shapiro talking about how the Jews sided with the British. Is he going to mention that there were also Jewish terror groups against the British? That some of the worst terror attacks in mandatory Palestine happened at the hands of Jewish terrorists? That the King David Hotel bombing, that was done by Ergun. That was done by Begin. This killed 91 people. And this was done by Jewish terrorist groups. Lehi and, yeah, and also they're one of the commanders, I think one of the leading commanders from Ergun who did this, ended up becoming Israeli prime minister. He founded Likud. He founded Netanyahu's party. Again, I will say that Ben Shapiro doing this is why I hate it when people say, because 1948 happens, because 1948 happened, that's why Israelis don't deserve to stay in Israel. Because at the end of the day, history can tell you, history can be very informative, but history does not justify whatever actions you want to enact today. Because the problem is that the Israeli side have their own history as well about this. And Ben Shapiro could actually sell a very good propaganda story. Ben Shapiro could actually sell a very good propaganda story on this. If he told the truth, he could still sell the Jewish side of things really well, but he's just lying as well. I don't get it. Like, Ram Ranch, enjoy it. Reminder, Lonerbox literally defended a Zionist in a debate and has used the same talking point Zionist when push comes to shove. Brilliant. If you have any points of your own, if you have any thoughts of your own, you can come to the Discord and talk. I don't know if you know, but like, no one gives a fuck. No one gives a fuck about your like strange fucking esoteric standards that you've like decided to impose on me. What? Because I said I don't think Israelis all deserve to be evicted based on what happened in 1948. Yeah, I don't, because that's fucking insane. And people who believe that can just say, why? Is there a statute of limitations on who's indigenous? Because if there's not, which doesn't seem to be if you think the 48 argument, is that Jews make the same argument. You're just making the same argument that Zionists do with a different cutoff point. It's so fucking dense. Anyway.
1948.
You guys and Ben Shapiro deserve each other, by the way. Like, because the way that both of you guys think, basically means that there can only be one winner. That the fighting never stops until one side destroys the other one. Also, this Al-Husseini guy, he was horribly anti-Semitic. He did tell Hitler that he thought the Holocaust was a good idea. He did say that, even though the motions were already in place. But Al-Husseini was not an elected representative. He was appointed through like a feudal system. That's why Palestinians tend to there's not like celebrations of Al-Husseini. There's not like there are statues up or there's a fond memory. He's not like a historical national hero, fucking Al-Husseini. He was a feudally appointed representative who was horribly anti-Semitic. And then after that, like, there's not really much left of him in Palestinian history. Anyway.
The British mandate ended and Israel declared its independence.
David Ben-Gurion read the Proclamation of Independence to 13 other members of the Israel Provisional National Council. Israel had taken its place among the nations of the world.
In 1964, with the Arabs still in full control of the Gaza Strip and West Bank, the Palestine Liberation Organization was founded, calling for the destruction of Israel. Here is a contemporaneous British report on the first chairman of the Palestine Liberation Organization.
One of the most extreme anti-Israeli politicians in the Arab world, Ahmed el-Shukeri. the leader of the Palestine Liberation Organization. As the spokesman for 1 million Palestine refugees, he's fanned the flames of hatred for Israel with unflagging...
Oh, he threw in the word refugees there. I wonder if Ben's going to explain how they became refugees and why they might have been a bit pissed off. Why they might have been a bit pissed off that a state was just founded on their old homes that they couldn't go back to. I wonder. Again, even if you want to use the map, the good old activist map, if you want to explain why this happened, in the 1920s, when Britain was promising these territories to Jewish people, only 6% of the population was Jewish. The way that they were moved in was against the will of the people who lived there. So I don't know if Ben Shapiro is okay with like another force imposing like immigration onto your country, like that you don't have a say in. I don't know if Ben Shapiro is okay with that. It's a strange, it's not really a standard even like a left-winger would apply, that someone else decides what your immigration is. And also, it wasn't just immigration. It was also land purchases from tenant farmers, which means that when a lot of these original Zionists bought up land from the British, they were buying houses that were lived in by tenant farmers, and those tenant farmers got kicked out. So I don't know, like he's just not going to explain why that anger existed and why Palestinians were very angry from going from this to this. And he also won't say why the UN partition, why this became this. And that's because the Palestinians who lived here were forced out. There were 30 massacres, about 500 villages cleared, and then they were sent into here, Jordan, Lebanon, and then they weren't allowed back. So but yeah, we're just never going to get that from. Maybe I want to maybe go over the whole story of 48, just because like I think a lot of people don't really know exactly how it went down. The fact that the fact that a lot of the removals happened before the Israeli-Arab War even started, like before the British mandate finished. There were already hundreds of thousands of people displaced. They don't talk about how the Israelis were going around different villages and documenting how many people lived in each one so they could plan ahead for how they would clear them and who would be allowed to go into them afterwards. They were poisoning the wells with typhoid to get people out. So yeah, they were breaking ceasefires with a lot of Arab villages had made peace with Jews, and they were expecting to just live as equal citizens after the mandate ended. And there were quite a few villages where those ceasefires, where those peace agreements were broken by Leahy, by fucking what'd you call it, Ergun, and where basically just like they would go into a village and just slaughter them. And a lot of the people who did it were very young as well. So when they, even when they thought they were being attacked from a certain village, say if they thought like a village was being attacked because there were Arab militants going through them, then when they went up to the villages, their plan was to like broadcast on a loudspeaker that they were coming and that the civilians who wanted to live in peace should leave so that the militants could be taken out. But they would often like broadcast the warnings whilst there was already gunfire happening, so no one heard them. Like it's really obscene. And then they would they'd round up all the kids and they would drop them off at the gates of Jerusalem where they could just go and live in orphanages. They would kill people after the fighting had stopped. They even massacred some villages where people were where the people who lived there, the Arabs who lived there, were telling militants that they didn't want them there. Were actually pushing out Palestinian militants because they wanted to live in peace instead. So yeah, that's why it was an ethnic cleansing. It was brutal.
Energy.
In 1967, the Arab League announced the three no's: no peace, no recognition, no negotiations. With all of Israel's enemies mobilizing against it, Israel launched a preemptive strike on the Egyptian Air Force, inaugurating the 1967 Six-Day War. This ended with Israel gaining miraculously the Sinai Desert, the Golan Heights, the Gaza Strip, Judea and Samaria, now known as the West Bank, as well as the entire...
Do you know who takes quite a bit of the blame for this war? Is the Soviets, because they gave false information to Egypt telling them that Israel was going to attack them, and that's why Egypt started amassing at the border, and then that's why Israel launched their preemptive strike, which basically ended the war in the space of like an hour. Yeah,
entirety of Jerusalem. In 1973, the Arabs launched all-out war again, this time on Yom Kippur. Israel survived and gained territory.
What territory did Israel gain during Yom Kippur? They already had Sinai and Golan. Did they gain territory in Yom Kippur? I didn't know that. I thought they. Huh.
In 1979, Israel gave the Sinai back to Egypt.
By the way, Yom Kippur was when Syria got into Golan Heights. No, they already had the Golan Heights. That's why Syria went into it. So Syria got to the border of the Golan Heights. Egypt went through the Sinai. And this was the war where Israel started arming their nukes and pointing them towards Damascus. Within 24 hours of this attack, there were people running around the fucking top, like the head office in Israel, the cabinet or whatever, and saying that this is going to be the end of Israel. We need to prepare our nukes. They got out of this war mostly because of help from the United States. They got military aid from the United States, and that was how they were able to push back.
For peace. In 1993, Israel agreed to the Oslo Accords, which promised a step-by-step process to establish a Palestinian state. In 1998, Israel conceded yet more territory to the Palestinian Authority under the prime ministership of Benjamin Netanyahu. In 2000, Israel...
He's going so... Okay, first of all, Oslo, this guy, Rabin, who started the Oslo Accord, gets assassinated by a right-wing Israeli who's so angry at the concept of them having peace. And one of the politicians who was leading protests against Rabin was Netanyahu. Netanyahu led protests where they carried coffins behind him, or they were chanting death to Rabin. They also took gallows as well, like nooses, yeah. So that's dishonest. What's the next one?
Step-by-step process to establish a Palestinian state. In 1998, Israel conceded yet more territory.
This is Netanyahu's prime minister period, where he is expanding settlements at an unprecedented rate, despite the fact that they're trying to negotiate land swaps for a final peace agreement.
The Palestinian Authority, under the prime ministership of Benjamin Netanyahu. In 2000, Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak offered Yasser Arafat, the terrorist leader of the Palestinian Authority, 91% control over the West Bank in contiguous territory, and an Israeli security presence along 15% of the border with Jordan. Arafat walked away from the table and began the Second Intifada, a massive terror wave that ended with the death.
This is maybe the harder one to defend on the Palestinian end, because I don't know the full details, and there's just so much there's so many mixed stories on either side because it was private, but people will say that Arafat was right to reject that offer because it basically involved too much Israeli control over the West Bank's airspace, borders, and over like water. That the proposal from Camp David would have meant that Palestine wouldn't have actually been a state. Not functionally, like not sovereign state. I don't think it's confirmed that Arafat launched the Second Intifada. The problem with Arafat is that he didn't stop it. But the idea that he launched it is still like I hear that, but I don't really know if the proof for it is completely there. Yeah.
Of thousands of Jews. In 2005, Israel unilaterally...
So you see here, between 2000 and 2005, he skips over 3 peace proposals. 4, actually. It's kind of like 4, isn't it? Because he skips over this one, Taba, which Ehud Barak was interested in, but then he lost an election to Sharon, the Likud party guy, who ditched it. Arafat did say yes to this after 18 months. See that? He accepted... yeah, after 18 months, yeah. But then Barak had lost power, and it went over to Sharon, who rejected it. So that's one. There's the Arab Peace Initiative, which was actually offered by the Arab League, or by like different Arab states. Yeah, Arab League. Again, Arafat embraced the initiative, but I think Sharon rejected it as a non-starter, because he didn't want to withdraw to the pre-67 borders. So that's another one. What is there? Roadmap to Peace? That's 2003. Let's do that 2002. George Bush. And this one, which I think a lot of... that expert we were watching the other day said that this was probably the most optimistic one, the Roadmap to Peace. Sharon rejects it because one of the proposals is to freeze the expansion of settlements. not to get rid of them, just to freeze the expansion. He didn't want to stop expanding settlements because he said that they didn't have enough houses for settlers who were starting families. And Ariel Sharon asked then U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell, "What do you want? For a pregnant woman to have an abortion just because she's a settler?" You don't want me to leave this? You don't want me to leave the video on when I'm out of my chair? What do you want me to do? Die? And then I think the last one, Geneva, the Geneva Accord 2003. I think this is the one where there's a demonstration in Tel Aviv supporting it. This was a really popular one, actually, at the time, on both sides for a period. And what did Sharon say about this one? I think he said that Israeli liberals who were backing this were traitors, or he implied it strongly. The initiative got broad international support, but was heavily criticized by Ariel Sharon. So he skipped over a lot there, Ben Shapiro. Skipped over quite a lot.
Drew from the Gaza Strip. Hamas immediately took it over and
this is what Sharon said. He said it was actively being carried out behind the back of the government and in coordination with the Palestinians, which is kind of suggesting like it's treacherous. Yeah, I would say so anyway. You know.
Began using it as a base for terrorist activity. That continues until this day. In 2008, Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert offered even more than Barak in terms of territory, with some land swaps to maintain Jewish-populated areas in exchange for some Israeli territory. Olmert even offered to relinquish Israeli sovereignty at the Temple Mount.
Does anyone remember what this is called? Anyone remember? Hey. Yep, it's called the Napkin Accords. Because Ehud Olmert didn't let Abbas take the map away with him. And he kind of forced him to commit to it on the spot, so he didn't have any time to study it or to examine like the land swaps and see how fair they were. So Abbas had to draw it on a napkin. Look at it, man. It's like a fetus. Emma Marco with the 10 euros. Video from traveling Israel from 3 days ago is pretty good from Israeli perspective. I might have a look, sure. So I don't know. I mean, it's not difficult for me to say that there have been plenty of obstacles to peace on the Palestinian side, like Hamas, like the suicide bombings, in some cases like Arafat as well, especially during Madrid in '94. Yeah, there have been examples. I don't know why it's so difficult for this partisan shithead to just like not only he could just point out to those. He'd be a propagandist. He can just say Arafat did this, this, and this, and he'd probably be right. And Hamas obviously makes it difficult to have a peace proposal at all. But he fucking lies, or just about the ones that actually were Israel was in the wrong, not Palestinian leaders. Ugh. Kind of sussy, Ben.
The holiest site in Judaism, as well as the entire Old City of Jerusalem, to a 5-member, non-sovereign international trusteeship comprising Israel, the PA, Jordan, the US, and Saudi Arabia. PA head Mahmoud Abbas walked away without a counteroffer.
Video from traveling Israel from 3 days
Myth
ago
number 3. Israel expelled all Palestinian Arabs from British Mandate Palestine. This is, again, a lie. Israel's founding documents
is he actually going to engage with the Nakba?
Asked Arabs to stay. Israel's Declaration of Independence, in the middle of an ongoing war with Arab nations, reads, quote, "We appeal, in the very midst of the onslaught launched against us now for months, to the Arab inhabitants of the State of Israel to preserve peace and participate in the upbuilding of the state on the basis of full and equal citizenship and due representation in all its provisional and permanent institutions."
So this is after 300, this is after 1/3 people have already been expelled. To the Arab inhabitants of the State of Israel. This is after 1/3 people have already been expelled. Eek.
Debate has raged for decades over how many Arabs left the nascent State of Israel thanks to expulsion, and how many left because they were told to leave by their own leaders. An estimated 250,000...
No, there's not. What the fuck? There were about 500 villages where people were displaced. How many were kicked out? How many left because their other leaders told them to? We know the number. Anyone know? Out of 500 villages. This is from Benny Morris's research as well. Not even like a left-winger. Definitely not a left-winger. This is the radio broadcast argument that the Arab nations sent radio broadcasts to Palestinians telling them to leave because there was going to be a war. We know now that the amount of villages that were vacated because of radio broadcasts was 6. 6 out of like almost 500. So, okay.
To 300,000 refugees left before their homes were even in a war zone.
We didn't compel them to leave. They left on their own will, or rather on the will of the Arab leaders.
This is a reliable source, isn't it? The guy who was in charge at the time. Okay.
Who advised them.
Because Israel denied this for so long. It was only a couple of decades ago where the archives got released and then people were actually able to look at what actually happened. And then people were able to interview the survivors and even IDF soldiers as well. But like it's a lot of it is from IDF documents. But yeah, of course this guy would say that because they denied it for so long.
Before trouble started.
The collapse of Arab society during the 1947-48 war, leaving many Arabs
what a fucking lying cunt. Like how, oh God.
Support has been well documented.
Israel will do everything in its power to help the resettlement of these refugees by paying compensation and by other means.
So by not letting them back, right? This is like on the same year that they've been kicked out, right?
Hundreds of thousands of these refugees ended up in the West Bank and Gaza, which remained Arab territory until 1967. Furthermore, Arab nations refused to take in hundreds of thousands of Arabs, turning their co-religionists into refugees who have maintained that status for literally decades, a situation unparalleled in human history.
That's true. The Arab nations do hold a lot of responsibility for being as shit as they were to refugees. Jordan, but again, there's a really interesting sleight of hand here with the language, where they just call them all Arabs, right? As if they've all got as if they don't have any conflicting interests across borders, as if all these countries they're all just the Arab countries and they should just be expected to act like a monolith. And the reason they do that is because it means that like by erasing that like distinct Palestinian identity, separates them from their rights to live in this area. And also, like when right of return gets proposed as a negotiation point, then Israelis will say things like, I think Ehud Barak said that we can't recognize right of return because Jews are never going to get right of return for their displacement in 1948 from all the surrounding Arab and North African countries. But then it's like, that only works if you think Palestinians and Arabs are indistinguishable. They're exactly the same thing. Obviously, Palestinians did not cause Jewish people to leave fucking Yemen or Iraq or like Algeria or Morocco or Tunisia. Like that wasn't done by Palestinians. That was done by other Arab countries. Nor did they didn't. That's also a refugee crisis that got solved because those Jewish people have citizenship in Israel. The Palestinian refugee crisis is not solved. Their kids and their grandkids are still refugees.
Fully 62% of such refugees live outside the West Bank and Gaza Strip, according to the UNRWA. Meanwhile, Israel, tiny Israel, took in over 800,000 Jews expelled from Arab lands between 1948 and 1951 and never asked for land to be returned to those Jews. Myth number 4. Israel is an apartheid state. Israel.
Yeah, so they just got to exchange. They just got to have their refugee crisis solved, while another group the difference is here
most returned expelled from Arab lands
is that Palestinians aren't responsible for any of this. They didn't do this. I don't know why you would. That's why calling them Arabs and just lumping them under that umbrella serves that purpose.
Between 1948 and 1951, and never.
Yeah, they never asked because they had somewhere to go. Yeah, they had somewhere that would take them. It's not the Palestinians' fault that they can't get citizenship in Lebanon or they can't get citizenship in Jordan or Egypt. That's not their fault, is it? Some of them try pretty hard to integrate into Lebanese society and shit. Like, but they're basically fucking like locked out hard of most employment, like a bunch of employment services. They can't buy houses or anything. Like they're refugees.
Asked for land to be returned to those Jews. Myth number 4: Israel is an apartheid state.
Oh.
Israel is most certainly not an apartheid state. Arab citizens of Israel have the same rights as Jewish citizens. 20% of all citizens of Israel are Arab. The vast majority of Palestinians live under Palestinian rule in the West Bank. All Arabs...
They live under... That's not even most of the West Bank isn't under Palestinian rule. 60% of the West Bank is controlled by Israel. The other 20-odd% of it is controlled by both of them, by both Israel and the PA, and then like the 20% remaining is controlled by the PA. But it's still all occupied territory. Do you know how the PA collects their taxes? People in the West Bank get taxed. The money goes to Israel, and then Israel gives it back to the PA. And sometimes Israel will reduce the tax income to the PA as well. So I mean,
in the Gaza Strip lived under Hamas rule. Israel's population, again, is 20% Arab. Arab parties have sat in the Israeli government, and Arab sits on Israel's Supreme Court. There are 0 Jews living under Palestinian rule. The only apartheid state is any state of Palestine. All of these myths have consequences. All of these lies have consequences. They lead to a pseudo-sophisticated context that allows for the murder of Jews.
Like, I don't know why he would say that, like, the amount of water that Palestinians get in West Bank and Gaza is controlled by Israel. And they get less water than people in Israel get. I don't know why, like, they get below the UN recommended average. Below the UN recommended minimum. How is that not, like, even just that alone, that's not for security purposes. That's unequal treatment of people that are under your watch.
It allows people in the West to believe that the grievances that are openly articulated by the Palestinian Authority, Islamic Jihad, and Hamas are actually about territory. Hamas openly calls for the murder of every Jew in the region. The Palestinian Authority gives actual bounties to the families of terrorists. Islamic Jihad has the same exact goals as Hamas. When evil people say they want to wipe Jews off the face of the earth, we ought to listen, not make up silly excuses as to why they don't actually mean what they say. The consequences of buying your own lies, not even their lies, your own lies, is dead Jews.
Why are you guys all why are so many of you talking about how Destiny's going to react to this? Is he debating Ben Shapiro on Palestine? What? Okay.
The world has witnessed the heinous attack by Hamas terrorists against innocent Israeli citizens.
What, they're debating on this topic? It'll probably come up. I don't think Destiny's going to trust like Ben Shapiro to be reasonable on it. Like, I think it's like that's one of the first things that anyone knows about Ben Shapiro is that he is irrationally pro-Israel. Like, what the fuck?
Massive and devastating attack killed over 1,000 Israeli men, women, children, babies. Thousands more were injured, kidnapped, held hostage. This sworn...
I think Ben Shapiro is probably guilty of the same thing that we accuse people like Hassan of. There's no way he can believe any of this stuff. Like, if he says the radio broadcasts that there's debate over how many Palestinians left historic Palestine because of radio broadcasts from Arab nations, like, you can just say, like, the answer is 6. It's 6 villages out of, like, 400 or 500. I don't think Ben Shapiro is prepared for that talking point. I don't know. Maybe he is. Maybe underneath, because every time Ben Shapiro talks about this, it's always the same bullet point, right? But we don't know if he has any elaborate knowledge underneath those bullet points or not. He might very well not. Destiny said he doesn't think what's happening in Israel is apartheid. The apartheid discussion is really hard to have because apartheid is a crime that doesn't have very much precedent. And the groups that are calling it apartheid tend to lean left. So that's like, it's very easy to dismiss if you're right wing. Like, I still think it's quite clear that, but you can just talk about, like, again, let's not talk about apartheid. Let's just talk about why do Palestinians get below the UN recommended minimum for water when Israel controls it? Why did Israel make that decision? He also said the West Bank might be apartheid. Yeah, it's just like, it's just isolate the ones that are not security related, and you're like, there's not really any justification for this.
Enemy of Israel will stop at nothing to slaughter every single Jew and claim Israel as their own. But there is a beacon of hope amidst the chaos. The International Fellowship of Christians and Jews is on the ground right now, providing critical essentials like food, medicine, and other emergency supplies for vulnerable Jews who need immediate help. But the need is massive and urgent. This great organization needs your help right now. To donate, please go to benforthefellowship.org. Give as generously as you can. Write it down.
Okay.
That's benforthefellowship.org. Thank you.
I've heard Ben before say that it's not the Palestinians, it's the leadership. I've heard him say that. And it's like, even though all his rhetoric suggests otherwise, I feel like at the end, he could have at least gone for the Red Cross appeal, which was to both groups, to Israelis and Palestinians, just to at least not appear like a dishonest hack piece of shit. But, yeah. Yeah. Wow. I didn't even need to prepare for that. These talking points were just, they're so obviously wrong. Every now and then I'll hear like an Israeli say something, I'm like, because I didn't know until recently that there was this whole Israeli counter-narrative about the Deir Yassin massacre. So I had to read a little bit about that, and it's like, actually, okay, no, yeah, the Zionists were completely in the wrong to do that. But you had to know a bit of fucking, a bit of the extra details. But I don't know, like the Ben Shapiro talking points, they're really obvious. They're really easy to get through. Yeah. Oh well. Oh well. Rip Benny boy. Yeah. Well, good segment, guys. Well done. Take